Hey, this is Bert with the Bread Brothers, and today I'm going to show you the way I make sourdough. Maybe I'll tell you really briefly that I've been making sourdough bread now for almost 2 years since I got a start from the other bread brother, Ben Behunin, gave me my start, and I've been obsessed ever since. Making it every single week, keeping track of every little change I've made to see what works best and what doesn't, and this is the way I do it. Now there are lots of ways you could do it, but this is the way I do it. So the first step you have to do is feed your sourdough start and get it active. So I'm going to do that right now. I feed my start, whose name is Jimmy, by the way, with equal parts of water to flour. That's by weight. So if you were to measure it out, that's about 1/2 cup of flour and about 1/4 cup of water. So I'm going to add that to my start that's been in the fridge all week and give it a good stir and let it sit on the counter until it's active. Now you can't set your watch to this. It'll take a while. It may take 2 hours. It may take 6. But I'll come back and I'll show you the difference. So let me give this a really good stir and let you see what that looks like so you know. It looks a lot like cake batter at this point. So I'll continue to stir all that flour in, and it will eat that flour, use it as fuel to activate this start. It's been 2 hours and 45 minutes since I mixed this, and you can see how much the start is going from when I mixed in the flour and water. I put a rubber band on there so you could see how much it's grown, and it's right here to the top neck of this. I'll let you see how bubbly and foamy this is, and it smells really good. So another way to test if your start is active enough is take a little bit of it and drop it into water, and if it floats, it's active. If it sinks, you need to give it more time. So the first thing I need to do is measure out 50 grams of the active start. And I've got my scale set to 0, and I use grams for all of my baking when I'm measuring. So let's see, I can see through my glass bowl here. I'm almost at 50. There we go. And that's all I need for this. Hit 0, and I need 350 grams of water. I've already measured it out, so I don't have to be as careful. I'm just going to pour that straight in and give it a quick whisk to incorporate it into the water, and just so that water and start is all one liquid. I'm going to take it off my scale because I've already measured out my flour. Next I'll add 50 grams of bread flour. Not all-purpose flour, but bread flour. Now lots of people mix other types of flours and to get different types of flavors. I'm just going to stick with plain bread flour today. And then 9 grams of salt. So I'll mix the salt into the flour just a little bit in the top of the flour here, and then just go right into the center and start mixing the flour into that start and water solution that we made. All right, I've mixed it enough with my spatula there. I'm going to get my hands in here. This is the best part of this, actually. You can start to feel if there's any lumps in it, if there's any weird pockets, so I can knead this all together. And it should be shaggy. It's really sticky, as you can see, and that's exactly what I want. And now this dough is ready. I'll just pull a little bit off my hands here. I'll cover this up with saran wrap, and this will sit for about an hour before I come back to it and knead it again. All right, this is what the dough looks like after it's sat for an hour. It still looks shaggy, and the next step for us to do is to get our hands in here and just give it a little bit of a knead. Not real heavy, you're not working this over, but just tightening up the dough. And you'll notice that just by doing this a few times, how much smoother looking this dough is getting. And I'm just using my fingers to feel what the dough feels like. It's a little bit more springy. It's not as sticky as it was an hour ago. And that's all I need to do to this dough right now. And in a half an hour, I'll come back and do a little bit of pull and folds on it next. Okay, the dough has sat for about a half an hour, and now I'm going to do what's called a pull and fold. This helps tighten the dough up and starts working those glutens. So I just take a piece of this dough and I pull up on it and fold it down. I turn it by a quarter and I do it again. I'm going to do that all the way around the dough and just pull and fold and put it back down. I'll do one set of these every 15 minutes, maybe 2 or 3 sets before I tuck this bad boy in for the night and let it rise all night long. And that's all there is to it. All right, our dough has risen all night long. They call that a bulk rise. And that can take anywhere between 7 and 8 hours, or as long as 12 or 14 hours, depending on the climate and your flour and lots of things. Again, you can't set your clock to sourdough, you just gotta let sourdough be sourdough. And so that went from a small ball in the bottom of this bowl to a full puffy dough ball that fills my entire glass bowl. The next step is to get it out of this bowl and into one of my bannetons or my bread baskets. You don't have to put it in a basket if you don't have one. They really do help. You could put it in a bowl if you wanted for the second rise. But these baskets come in multiple sizes. They're relatively cheap on the internet. And this one I have with a liner in it. They come with the liners. It just requires less flour so it doesn't stick when you put your dough in there. And if you are not using the liner, you need to add a lot more flour to keep it from sticking. And so I'm going to remove this from the bowl and shape it on my bench here a little bit. Now, some people will put their dough ball for the bulk rise into a clean greased bowl so it's easy to get it out. I just find that's another thing to have to wash. So I'm just going to dump this over and slide my fingers in up under the edges of the bowl and the dough and release this onto my countertop here. Okay, now I want to shape this dough, and it requires a few folds. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it about in half and pat that down, and then just kind of do that again, do another half, and kind of push it down in on itself, and then this last fourth. And now I'll just roll it over onto itself. And now I have a nice ball here, and I'll use my hands in a cup and just shape that ball and let that sit here on the counter. They call it a bench rest. It isn't necessary. I like to do it. It allows me to clean my bowl and get everything else ready. And so I'll just let this sit here on the counter for 10 minutes. Okay. The dough has rested on the countertop here for about 10 minutes. I'm going to take my scraper and use it to help me finalize the shape. I've floured my hands a little bit. I'm just going to cup and scoop and get that nice tight ball. I'm going to flour the top of it and flour the inside of the basket here so it doesn't stick, and use the scrape to help me transfer it and put it top side down into the basket. And we're just going to let this sit and rise again, probably a couple of hours. Okay, our sourdough has been rising in the banneton for a couple of hours for that second rise. You can see it hasn't quite doubled in size, but it is nice and puffy. And now we need to transfer it from the banneton into the baking pot. And the easiest way to do that is with a cookie sheet. So I'm just going to flip this with the parchment paper I have ready over onto it, and just flip it over onto its, so it'll be right side up. And because I floured it a little bit and it has this liner, it comes out very easily. I'm going to rub this flour in just a little bit, maybe add a little bit extra so my decorative scoring will show through a little bit. Now it's important to score the bread, otherwise it will crack open because it rises so fast and there's so much heat that needs to come out of it. So typically we score, and I'm just using a straight razor. There are lots of fancy bread lambs and different things out there, but I am just going to cut a straight slash down the middle with this sharp razor. I'm going to go do a cross through it and just add some simple scores. You can get pretty fancy, and I've done a few other things. You can check out our Instagram page, but for today, just some quick, simple slashes on the top here, just to score it. And then I'll transfer it using my parchment paper into the baking pot. Now this baking pot was made by my fellow bread brother, Ben Behunnen. It's my favorite. I've tried baking sourdough and lots of other things, and I always have the best results with my pot here. It holds the temperature really great. I'm just squishing down the sides of the parchment paper a little bit, just so I don't have any funny wrinkles. You could cut a perfect little circle or whatever, but it's not worth the time to me. And then I'll bake this in the oven at 450 degrees for 20 minutes with the lid on. And then I'll set the timer for another 25 to 30 minutes with the lid off. And we'll come back and show you what that looks like. Okay, this is finished. I'm going to take it out of the oven here and put it on a cooling rack, and I'll show it to you when it's cooled off. Okay, the bread's out of the oven. It's sat on the cooling rack for 30 or 40 minutes. I have 2 loaves here that I made. When the oven's on and I'm making a mess, I usually make more than 1 loaf. You can see I did some different scoring on the top of this. It cracked open because I didn't cut deep enough, but it's still pretty and it's going to taste delicious. And the reason I bake it in the pot is because all that steam as it's coming out of these cracks is filling that pot and creating that nice crust. Otherwise, if you were to bake it on a pizza stone or directly on a cookie sheet, you're going to need to have a tray, metal pan that you pour water into, hot water into, to create the steam in the oven. That's why I like the pot, so I don't have to deal with that. So I'm going to cut into this, and the key is you'll hear the crust on this. You hear the nice crunch on that. I'll open that up and show you what the crumb looks like. You can see the bubbles through there. It should spring back nicely. It's nice and soft. It smells so good. I can't wait to cut into this. The easiest way to do this is just turn it cut side down and just start in onto your slices. It's nice and soft on the inside, crunchy on the outside. That's excellent sourdough. Enjoy. I hope you share some comments, like, and subscribe to the channel. Happy baking.